I want to talk about something that has been on my mind for a while now, and I think a lot of you who are in tech or studying to get into tech are probably thinking about the same thing. The question is basically this: is programming still a career worth pursuing in 2026, or is AI slowly replacing developers and making this whole field uncertain? And I want to answer this honestly, not the way someone on Reddit would answer it, not with doom and gloom, and not with blind optimism either, but from my actual experience of living this life as a data engineer here in Finland. Let me give you a little bit of context first, because I think it matters. I moved to Finland from the Middle East about 6 years ago, originally to start a PhD, and after 1 year I left that path and started working as a developer. I had already worked as a web developer, a machine learning engineer, and a data scientist before coming here, so I had some background. But still, starting from zero in a new country, rebuilding your professional network, convincing companies to hire you when you have a foreign name and a mixed background, that is not easy. I sent more than 100 job applications just to find my first job here, and I got maybe 20 interviews out of that whole process. And eventually I got one offer. That one offer changed everything. So when I talk about this topic, I am not talking from a comfortable theoretical position. I am talking from real experience. Now here is what is actually happening in 2026 in the job market. If you spend 5 minutes on Reddit or LinkedIn, you will find two completely opposite groups of people. One group is saying the market is completely broken, companies are not hiring junior developers, AI is doing all the coding, and the whole profession is heading towards some kind of extinction. The other group is saying they get recruiter messages every week, they just switched jobs with a 30% salary increase, and they don't understand what everyone is panicking about. And honestly, both of these groups are telling the truth, just from very different positions. What I have noticed, both from searching around LinkedIn myself and from talking to people in this industry, is that the demand for junior and entry-level positions has genuinely gotten smaller. Companies expect more from you even at the beginning, but at the same time, the demand for experienced engineers, people who understand systems, who can architect solutions, who can look at a large code base and actually understand what is going on, that demand has not disappeared. If anything, it is more concentrated. Companies want fewer people, but more capable ones. And this is exactly where AI comes in as both the problem and the solution. Here is the honest reality of AI and coding tools in 2026. I use them every day. Most people in my team use them. They save time, they help with repetitive tasks, they help you write boilerplate code faster, and sometimes they help you think through a problem from a different angle. But the idea that AI is going to replace developers the way an ATM replaced bank tellers, I think that comparison completely misses what software engineering actually is. Because most of what I do as a data engineer is not writing syntax. It is understanding why a pipeline is failing at 2 in the morning. It is figuring out why the data going into one system does not match the data coming out of another system. It is sitting in a meeting and trying to explain to a product manager why what they want is technically impossible in 2 weeks, but completely possible in 8 weeks if we design it properly. AI cannot do those things for you, at least not yet, and probably not in the way people imagine. I have had days at work where I spent 6 or 7 hours debugging a single issue, and the answer in the end was something that no AI tool would have easily found because the context was spread across 10 different systems, 5 different teams, and 2 years of undocumented decisions. That kind of problem solving requires a human who has been embedded in that specific environment for months or years. That is not something you outsource to a language model. But here is the part that I think people are not talking about enough. And this is something I learned the hard way through my own career. The developers who are struggling the most right now are the ones who thought coding was the entire job. And I completely understand that thinking because when you are learning to program, when you are a junior developer, coding feels like the main thing. You are proud of the code you write. You spend hours optimizing a function, and that makes sense at that stage. But at some point, you have to make a shift in your thinking. And the shift is this. Writing code is maybe 20 or 30% of the job. The rest is understanding systems, communicating with other people, making architectural decisions, thinking about scalability and reliability, and connecting different pieces of technology together to solve a real business problem. I built my own SaaS product called Floweboard, which is a tool for creating animated flowcharts and diagrams. And the experience of building that taught me something very clearly. The coding part, the actual development of the product, was the smallest challenge. The real challenge was understanding what problem I was solving, who the users were, how to reach them, how to present the product in a way that made sense to someone who had never heard of it before. And that is the same lesson that applies to working inside a company. Being technically strong is necessary, but not sufficient. The engineers who are genuinely irreplaceable are the ones who can see the big picture. So when I see the Reddit discussion about whether companies are still hiring software engineers, and I read through all those comments from people with very different experiences, what I see is actually not a picture of a dying industry. I see a picture of an industry that is becoming more demanding and more selective. The bar is moving up. Companies are not looking for someone who can write a React component from scratch, because frankly, a lot of tools can help with that now. They are looking for someone who knows when to use React and when not to. Someone who understands why the previous developer made certain decisions. Someone who can identify that a problem in the front end is actually caused by a misconfigured database query in the back end. In Finland specifically, the situation is a bit different from the United States. The range of salaries is narrower, the market is smaller, and companies here tend to be more careful about hiring, because the employment laws protect workers quite strongly, which means companies think carefully before they bring someone in. But even here, if you have real experience and you can demonstrate that you understand systems and not just syntax, finding work is possible. It is slower and more competitive than it was 3 or 4 years ago, but it is not impossible. My honest advice, and this comes from everything I have experienced over the past 6 or 7 years in this field, is this. Stop thinking of yourself as someone who writes code and start thinking of yourself as someone who solves technical problems. Learn how to use AI tools, not because they are going to replace you, but because not using them puts you behind. Someone who uses these tools effectively can do in 2 hours what used to take a full day, and that makes them more valuable, not less. Learn about cloud services, learn about data pipelines, learn about how systems talk to each other, because that infrastructure knowledge is exactly what is becoming more important as AI handles more of the surface level coding. Also, and I cannot stress this enough, build something, anything. It does not have to be perfect. It does not have to be a product that makes money. But having a project that you built from scratch, that you deployed somewhere, that actually does something real, that is worth more on a CV than a list of technologies you have studied. I started this whole journey building small projects, failing at most of them, learning from each one, and gradually that process built the skills that eventually got me hired in a country where I had no connections and no local experience. The future of programming is not the end of programmers, it is the evolution of what a programmer is. If you are willing to grow beyond the code itself and understand the larger picture of what technology actually does in the real world, then yes, there is still a career here. And honestly, in many ways, the engineers who can do that are going to be more valuable now than they ever were before. That is my take on it. Let me know what you think in the comments. I am always curious to hear what your experience has been, especially if you are in Europe or in a similar situation to where I started. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.